As a passionate gamer seeking true escapism, Dragons Dogma 2 fell far short of my expectations, marred by a myriad of flaws that sabotaged any hopes for immersive enjoyment. From its cumbersome systems to its lackluster open world, this game is a textbook example of how not to craft a captivating experience that feels worthy of your time. Now for me, a good game needs to have some core pillars that it's built upon, and those pillars do not waver for me depending on who's making the game or how much hype there is for a game or what type of weird emotional attachment I have to a game before it's ever released. But saying that, I think we are all willing to forgive a game that's lacking in certain areas if it makes up for it in others, and a lot of that will come down to personal taste and personal opinion. Just for example, I'm willing to forgive a game that maybe has a story that's a bit basic if the gameplay and the combat loop and the general flow of the game is excellent. I think at our core, gamers are a more forgiving bunch than what you think if you spend too much time on Twitter, because this is a hobby we love and we do want to love games. However, for me, Dragons Dogma 2 doesn't excel in any area. In fact, it fails to deliver even a moderately interesting experience across all of the core pillars that I look for in a game. Now here at Pass the Controller, we review games from the point of view of players whose gaming time is precious. I've played games since the 80s, and as we grow older, let's be honest, real life, work, jobs, relationships, kids, they all have an impact on how we enjoy games and how we consume them. And all my reviews will be from the perspective of a player who values that golden hour or golden 2 hours you might have in a day to play video games. And it's from that perspective I can confidently say that Dragons Dogma 2 is not worth your time. Let me break down how I came to that conclusion. The first thing you need to understand when thinking about buying Dragons Dogma 2 is what type of game are you getting. Nothing frustrates me more than when people pick up a game and expect it to be something completely different than what it actually is. Dragons Dogma 2 is a game about exploration, and this is taken from the director's own words. He made a point of saying how there won't be any fast travel in Dragons Dogma 2 because you don't need fast travel if the world is captivating. Ironically, Dragons Dogma 2 has a world that is so devoid of anything that captivates you that it makes it an absolute slog to play. And that is the core issue at Dragons Dogma 2. They made a game about the journey, but that journey is pretty bland and repetitive. So let's talk about the journey, aka exploration. The issue with exploration in Dragons Dogma is that the core systems that underpin the exploration, the walking, the traversing, they are full of friction and a lack of joy. From the weight management system, to the stamina system, to the combat, to the lack of enemy variety, to the lack of rewards for exploration, they all come together to create a journey lacking any joy. The dearth of enemy variety coupled with mundane side quests transform exploration into a monotonous slog, leaving players yearning for a reprieve in the form of fast travel, which is mostly absent unless you spend money. More on that later. Combat, touted as a highlight, quickly loses its luster due to its simplicity and lack of challenge. The game is way too easy. Even the larger enemies, which were often touted in the adverts and pushed in front of the player to entice you to buy the game, honestly become boring after a couple of times of fighting the same large enemies. And with the game being so easy, it just lacks any feeling of accomplishment. The weight carry system further compounds travel woes, draining stamina and discouraging exploration rather than encouraging. Even the allure of discovering new gear is dampened by the fact that most of the good gear is just bought in shops in towns. Not all of it, but a large majority of it. And thus the need or the want to explore is kind of removed from the player. Now, if a game lacks maybe on the core gameplay side of things, which let's be honest is the most important part of a game, but I'm playing devil's advocate here. Let's say it lacks there. Maybe the story will push you through, maybe the interesting characters, maybe the stories, maybe the people you meet and their stories will propel you to explore the world. Dragons Dogma 2's story couldn't be worse if they tried. Honestly, it feels like they've just used the AI generator to create the story and just plopped you in the world. The story is laughable at times, it lacks any interesting characters, your own character is basically mute, and it fails to deliver compelling world in terms of lore, it fails to deliver compelling characters in terms of motives. The story has nothing going for it and is completely forgettable. So with Dragons Dogma 2 being all about the journey and exploration, I felt it's lacking in any systems, mechanics that foster, that nurture that feeling for exploration, that want for exploration. In fact, I felt all the systems in Dragons Dogma 2 only serve to alienate and frustrate the player. Now, there's a lot in common here with Death Stranding in many ways, but in many ways it's lacking any of what made Death Stranding stand out. Death Stranding had fascinating characters, intriguing lore, and a world that was always keeping you guessing. Okay, the combat may not have been the best, but everything else kind of kept you going. There's none of that here. This is like Death Stranding without anything interesting going on. And Death Stranding without anything interesting going on is just you walking around. Now, a lot of these stability issues which players have been having I've not touched on. That's because, being totally honest here, I had zero stability issues. The game actually ran perfectly on my computer, which I know is very rare, but I have to mention the stability issues. The game released in a terrible state for the large majority of the players, even more of a reason to not pick up the game. Onto the pawn system, I didn't mind the pawn system. It somewhat made exploring this rather vapid open world somewhat interesting, even though they repeat the same lines again and again and again. But you know what, it added a touch of flair to the proceedings, but it's nothing special, let's be totally honest. So at the start of this review, I talked about core pillars, and I talked about how games we love can be lacking in certain core aspects, but they can more than make up for it in others, and thus we can fall in love with a game. Dragons Dogma 2 has a terrible story, has basic and very easy combat, has no enemy variety, has a stamina and weight management system that makes exploration a chore, and exploration is a core part of this game, with the world lacking any meaningful fast travel, thus forcing you into exploring the world. The rewards for which are basically not there. The side quests, which were touted as kind of like this organic thing that everyone's journey will be different, the side quests that you stumble upon are so basic and so bland. Go to one area, find somebody, kill the enemies, go to another area, talk to somebody. Yes, there's the odd thing, like, you know, you can free someone from a jail cell, you can not free them, or the odd choices here and there, but honestly, it doesn't make up for the rest of the game, which is such a time sink. I actually, for the first time in my life, about 30 or 40 hours into Dragons Dogma 2, I downloaded some mods to see if it was the core systems that made me not enjoy the game. So I downloaded a zero sprint mod, basically, which meant I didn't have to manage my weight or stamina. Was that the issue? Well, I played about 5 to 10 hours with that no stamina, and it wasn't the issue. The issue was the enemies are boring, the combat's very simple, and everything dies really quickly. And at one point I got to a kind of point of no return where I was clearly under-leveled, so I had to go and do side quests and level up. And by God, it was dull. I mean, I feel like I'm out of touch here. The user reviews of this game are more in line with what I think about the game. The critic reviews are crazy, like 8.6, 86 on Metacritic for Dragons Dogma 2. If anyone can leave a comment and let me know anything this does to a level of 86%, would you give any aspect of this, graphics, presentation, combat, story, lore, whatever, would you give anything 86%? I'd love to know what people are thinking, and I'm happy to open a discussion on it. But yeah, that's Dragons Dogma 2. This is Past the Controller. I like to review games from the perspective of players who have more going on in their life, and thus their gaming time is restricted. I want to review games from the perspective of players who need games that respect their free time. Dragons Dogma 2 actively disrespects your free time and is not worth it. I would avoid at all costs if you're a gamer who's got alternate hobbies, a family, and you only get a couple of hours a week to play a game. Dragons Dogma 2 is not the game to spend those couple of hours. I've not touched upon the microtransactions, which before I played the game didn't think were a big issue. I was actually traveling when Dragons Dogma 2 came out, so when I saw the microtransactions on paper, they looked like it looked like a nothing story to me. After playing Dragons Dogma 2, I do think those microtransactions are a touch predatory. The game has a lot of friction, and those microtransactions allow for a kind of loosening of the friction, if you will. I don't like that. I'm a huge Capcom fan. Monster Hunter, Resident Evil, Dino Crisis. These are games I grew up on as a kid. I love Capcom so much. Street Fighter. Yeah, and this just feels like a real step back. This is a disappointing game. I feel like it should have been left to cook for at least another 6 months. I was actually at Tokyo Game Show in 2023, and I saw Dragons Dogma 2, and I remember thinking, something doesn't feel right about Dragons Dogma. I played it for a short amount of time at the booth, And then I watched other people play it, and my initial reaction was bang on. It just felt very rough around the edges and it needed some work. And that is exactly where it is on release. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is Past the Controller. Peace out, guys. Take care.